Yeah, so my role is one of the curators that developed this exhibition. My colleague Danielle and I here at the NGV worked with two curators at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art in America. They curated a show first for their museum in America earlier this year, and then we worked with them on developing an exhibition which is basically twice the size, including all the works from the NGV's own collection. Both the McQueen works, there's 120 works in all in the exhibition, and 80 artworks that help us. With this approach, we're exploring how McQueen worked creatively as an artist, where he took his inspiration from, and like artists before him, he looked to other artists, he looked to popular culture, he looked to cinema, he looked to history and art history, religious beliefs, you name it, all gets subsumed and synthesised into his ideas, and then his amazing collections, so iconic. He was an incredible storyteller, but also a remarkable technician. You know, he trained on Savile Row, so he knew how to make a garment, he knew how to cut, to tailor, and at the age of 26, he was plucked from London and became the head of Givenchy, one of the leading couture houses in Paris, so that his skills went to the next level. So this exhibition explores works from the early 90s when he first set up his label after finishing at fashion school, right through to 2010 at the time of his death. And across that we featured 31 of his collections, so really extensive. And we also have included some wonderful runway footage showing not only the garments themselves but then how they were presented on the runway, and wonderful back-of-house photography by British photographer Robert Farrer, whose unique style captured that frenetic, candid atmosphere behind the scenes as the models are getting dressed, having their hair and makeup done before they head out into the bright lights of the catwalk.
Now, McQueen prided himself on being a pragmatist, that it's about clothes that you wear. At the same time, he used fashion as a platform for commentary on various issues, and in some cases was misinterpreted unfairly about what he was saying.
Absolutely, as you say, there's this really interesting tension with his work. He was incredibly brave and honest, creative person who felt that it was not his role to present pretty, easy, forgettable clothing. He wanted to have an impact. He had an agenda with his designs to send very clear messages, whether they were political messages or personal messages. Anything from reflecting on the nature of his own Scottish ancestry and the real experience of the Scottish Highlanders in the 18th and 19th century as the Brits cleared those highlands, an act of great brutality. He wanted people to understand that the Highlands was not just all about tartan and wifty-wafty girls drifting through the moss and the mist. So moments like that, but also big statements of a more existential nature about the whole nature of life, death, and also the things that we're doing to our planet. You know, way ahead of his time in that sense. This was a young man that right from the start was fascinated by nature and natural history. Birds were a favourite of his, but across the board this was a theme that he drew on time and time again. So theories around evolution were really instrumental in developing some of his ideas, and when it came to that final collection that he presented in 2010, Plato's Atlantis, making a very clear statement about the fact that unless we change what we're doing and how we're behaving in relation to our treatment of the planet, then we almost certainly sea levels are going to continue to rise, and we will have to almost reverse evolve into creatures that can survive under the water.
Yeah. Do you have a view of the standard of fashion reporting that resulted in a lot of the unfounded and baseless accusations that he was a misogynist or that he hated women? You look at the work and you look at his career, it's very difficult to reconcile a journalistic view that he is these things with the work.
No, you've absolutely honed in on a really important conundrum, that you're right, at certain points the press were very quick to condemn and to make judgment calls that showed very little or no appreciation for what he was trying to say. Obviously, a very clear example of that was his 1996 autumn-winter collection named Highland Rape, which by many journalists was interpreted literally And in actual fact, this was a classic example of where he was making a very big political statement about something to do with national violence and nation states kind of impacting on each other, not about the individual. And likewise, for this exhibition and for the publication, we interviewed many key people that worked and collaborated with Alexander McQueen, including journalists who reflected on the fact that in those days with journalism, you'd see the show, there was no context, there was no fact-checking, there was no Googling information on the web even, and you were calling that story straight down the phone to to the press. So I think, many of them now would recognise that was out of line. It wasn't really looking at the works, really understanding what he was trying to do. And likewise, those really difficult statements he made about overconsumption, about the churn and the unrelated nature of the fashion industry itself. The thing that supported him was also something that he was able to critique.
A big part of his life, unfortunately, was the way it ended. Now, this exhibition is a celebration of his work. You're not really going into his life and what happened with his life. That was obviously a conscious decision. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, you're quite right, because there's been a lot, publications, films, previous projects, exhibitions that have explored, I guess, in a more broadly biographical way, the life of Alexander McQueen. What we felt we wanted to do with this opportunity is to actually slow people down and encourage them to look at the work, look at what he created. Obviously, everyone is very fascinated in him as a person and his story. It's an incredible story. But for us, it was the opportunity to really look at what he outputted, what he made, what that incredible mind of his generated, which had a lot more. Yes, there was darkness, there were sort of difficult issues, but a great deal of hope too reflected in his work. Lee McQueen was a huge film fan, whether that was high art or everything in between, and he drew on film across his lifetime, time and time again. Things like The Birds, The Hunger, They Shoot Horses, don't they? Truly iconic films in the same vein as Barry Lyndon. This particular film for him was drawing him into a particular period, the 18th century, which he drew on in great detail through the cut and the detail of the garments, the music as the show was presented in the round on a beautiful pedestal plinth with models walking in circle around an orchestra playing the Saravan piece of music. So all so beautifully interwoven with the story he was telling with his clothes.